Welcome to another Thursday night Bible study, brought to you as a ministry of SIGBC.
And we continue today our discussion on the subject of the Christian's call to be generous. So Christmas time, it is the time of year when we focus on the subject of giving. Our minds are naturally on the subject of giving. We prepare fancy meals, we go places together, we spend a lot of money on hotels and restaurants, we buy presents, and so it's nice to both give and to receive at this time of year. But it is not necessarily the act of giving alone that God seems to be concerned about. God seems to be concerned, yes, with the act of giving it, but also the heart behind the giver. And so tonight, we thought we would look at the book of Deuteronomy, the Old Testament, the book of Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 7 through 11, and make 5 observations. We're also going to look at the book of Proverbs a little bit, but we'll make 5 observations concerning the giving believer. So giving believers are expected to, and there'll be 5 observations from the book of Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 7 through 11. I love the book of Proverbs. That's why we're going to quote one of the verses from Proverbs anyway. But I love the Proverbs because there are so many witty and pithy sayings that are filled with wisdom. And one of the sayings in the book of Proverbs is about an individual who pretends like he's giving and says, eat, eat, but deep down he wants you to stop eating because he doesn't want you to eat all of his food. And so he's like, put it after your throat. Don't eat food from someone who isn't actually generous and doesn't actually want you to eat that which he has supposedly prepared for you. Well, God, when he was giving the law, and then when he gave the second giving of the law, Deuteronomy meaning second law, nomos meaning law, and duo or deuteros meaning two. And so the second giving of the law, Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 7 through 11 says this: if anyone is poor among your fellow Israelites in any of the towns the Lord your God is giving you. So if you happen to find someone who is poor in one of your towns, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted towards them. So he says 2 things. Remember, the focus is not just on the act of giving, the focus is also on the heart of the giver. And so he says 2 things. Do not be hard-hearted, have a heart of compassion, and do not be tight-fisted. And he's actually going to use this fist illustration about holding on to that which is yours and then letting go of that which is yours that God has given to you. When he says, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted towards them. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend them whatever they need. The Bible, in many cases, equates lending, the heart of being willing to lend someone what they need and being willing to give someone what they need, almost on equal footings. The idea is you don't lend begrudgingly and you don't give begrudgingly. The Israelites were supposed to give to their fellow Israelites whenever their fellow Israelites were in need, and they knew that at the end of the 7 years and at the end of the 49 years, the year of Jubilee, then they had to forgive all their debts. And so they're like, maybe I don't want to loan this person this money because the end of the time is coming when I'm supposed to forgive them their debts. And so if I loan them money now and then 6 months from now the time comes to forgive the debts, and I'll lose all that money. No, he says, don't be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward poor people who live among you. He says, rather be open-handed and freely lend them whatever they need. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. The 7th year, the year for canceling debt, is near, so that you do not show ill will toward the needy among your fellow Israelites and give them nothing. They may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin. In other words, those who are unwilling to be generous with that which God has provided are guilty of wrongdoing in God's eyes. And then he continues in verse 10, give generously to them, and do so without a grudging heart. Then, because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to do. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy in your land. Even those who have a desire to be generous need to understand that God expects us to live reasonably and rationally. And it is possible to be too generous. And what I mean by that is, I've known of people who, when someone else was in trouble, they gave them their rent money. And then when the time came to pay the rent, they didn't have enough money to pay the rent. And now they were the ones that were in financial trouble because they gave away something that didn't belong to them. Rent money belongs to the landlord, not to you. And so we have to be careful, even in our generosity, we have to be careful that we give only that which is available for giving. It is enjoyable to give. It is nice to be able to help people, and it is nice to see the joy on the faces of other people whenever they are grateful for your help. But as he concluded at the end, the poor you will have with you always. You're always going to have people who are in need. One of the struggles that we have when we have a lot of friends from countries that are not necessarily well off, and in our particular cases, we have a lot of friends in both India and in the Philippines. And once in a while, we will receive notes hinting at, hey, we have this ministry need. Maybe you could help us out. Hey, we have this ministry need. Maybe you could help us out. And in their minds, they're simply suggesting that we help them out with a particular need. What they don't realize is there's about 50 other people who are making the exact same request. And so you have to decide, if you, with a limited amount of funds with which to be generous, you have to decide who it is that God wants you to help and who it is that you are unable to, unless God blesses you with more financial ability. And so discernment is important. But the desire to give is a good desire, and that's why God calls us to be giving. So, 5 observations from this passage. Number 1, giving believers are giving because God is always so giving to us. We recognize that all that we have and all that we are is because of God's goodness to us. And so, as instruments of God's love, then, since God has been so generous to us, we desire to be giving toward others. So our giving is based upon our acknowledgement of the goodness of God in giving us all that we have, all that we need, all that we enjoy as well. And so giving believers are giving because God is always so giving to us. In Deuteronomy 15 verse 7, if anyone is poor among your fellow Israelites in any of the towns of the land the Lord your God is giving you, you see, the idea was God gave you this land, the place that you live, the harvest that you receive, the houses that you live in. These are all gifts to you from God. And so be giving as well. The second observation is giving believers understand that which God has blessed us with is intended in part to be used to bless others. And this is a continuation of verse 7, where he began by saying, if anyone is poor among you, your fellow Israelites in the towns, the land the Lord your God is giving you, then he says, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward them. Rather be open-handed and freely lend them whatever they need. So giving believers understand that with which God has blessed us is intended to be used in part to bless others as well. Corrie ten Boom stated it very succinctly when this idea of being open-handed and giving freely, when she said, I have learned to hold the things of this world loosely in my hands, for I find that it hurts more whenever God has to pry them from my fingers. And that's a paraphrase of what she said, actually. But the idea is the harder we hold on to something, the more difficult it is for us to give it up. But if we have a heart that says, God gave it to me, I hold it loosely in my hands, and whatever I can do to help others with what God has given to me, I'll be open-handed, not tight-fisted towards them. So, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward them. Rather be open-handed and freely lend them whatever they need. If God has blessed you with the ability to do so, then do help others. Third observation, giving believers are not to consider what they will get from being giving. A lot of times you hear preachers, and they're all about sow that seed money, because when you sow that seed money, God is going to pour out an abundant blessings upon you. So sow that seed money, have faith and sow that seed money, and then give it to me, by the way, and then God will bless you abundantly. But if you don't sow that seed money, God's not going to bless you. No. The idea isn't we give so that we can receive. The idea is we give and God naturally blesses us as a result. Okay, so heart is everything, motivation is everything, and giving believers are not to consider what they will get from being giving. So in verse 9, he says, be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. The seventh year, the year for canceling debts, is near, so that you do not show ill will towards the needy among your fellow Israelites and give them nothing. They may appeal to the Lord against you, and you'll be found to be guilty of sin. The idea is, don't think, what am I going to get out of this? Or how much is this going to cost me? Say, how great is the need and how can I help? In fact, remember, last week we were looking at Luke chapter 6, verse 35, where Jesus himself taught us, love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. He's quoting Deuteronomy. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He, that is God, is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. So even if it's your enemy, you love them, and you be willing to give to them and lend to them. Don't think of what you can get in return. Don't think of how much you might lose if they don't pay you back. If God has blessed you with the ability to do so, then be generous, be giving. Number 4, giving believers are expected to give generously and without a grudging heart, because what we have is from God, and He will bless us even more when we do. So remember, the motivation is not if I do, God will. No, it is I give, and then God says, I will. The motivation is not what can I get from giving. The motivation is I desire to be a blessing to those as God has been a blessing to me, and then God bestows even more blessings upon us as a result. It is the result, not the motivation. So giving believers are expected to give generously and without a grudging heart, simply because what we have is from God, and He will bless us even more when we do. So verse 10, give generously to them, that is, the poor in your community, and do so without a grudging heart. Then, because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all of your work and in everything you put your hand to. I mentioned people of the Philippines. The people of the Philippines are famous for their hard work and their hospitality. And almost to a fault, actually, the Filipinos are generous naturally, it seems. And hospitality is a great part of the Filipino culture. And so it's, I think, much easier for someone in that culture of giving and culture of hospitality to be able to be giving and to be obedient to God's desires that we be giving. So we are to give generously to the poor and do so without a grudging heart. Then because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and everything you put your hand to. As we are a blessing to others, God promises that he will take care of us as well. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 28, verse 27, we read, "Those who give to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to them receive many curses." You remember 1 John, "Whoso hath this world's goods, and sees his brother have need, and shuts up his vows of compassion toward him, how can that person say the love of God dwells in them?" So our heartfelt giving is an outpouring of our gratitude to God for the compassion that he has bestowed upon us. Our love for God motivates us to give to others. So those who give to the poor will lack nothing. It's not the motivation, it is the result of our being giving. And number 5, giving believers know that although there will always be those who are in need around us, we are always to be open-handed toward the poor anyway. So we're not going to be able to eliminate poverty in this world. There's a lot of movements today like eliminate poverty, get rid of world hunger, create world peace. Lots of nice slogans. Bible says the poor you'll have with you always. In fact, Jesus himself said the poor you'll have with you always when he was talking about his anointing before his burial. But the fact that there will always be poor people should not in any way affect the reality that we can be an instrument of God's blessing, as long as we are willing to be giving. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy in the land. God does tell us that we are to have a hierarchical priority of giving. And so I'll go ahead and conclude with the hierarchical priority of giving. The tithe belongs to God. We know that to be true. And then, secondly, we are supposed to give to provide for our families. And then thirdly, we are supposed to give to fellow believers, especially to those who are the household of faith. And then finally, we are supposed to be willing to give to those who are around us that are in need, for whom we have the opportunity to share God's love and blessings in a tangible way. So yes, while there is a hierarchy of giving, always God first, then meeting the needs of your family, and then your fellow believers, and also then those who are in need, who are in your community around you. God says, be giving.
Thank you for listening. You can also join us in person or live on Facebook every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Japan time. This has been a ministry of Sakahogi International Grace Baptist Church.